Before we get started with this episode, I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening. I absolutely love producing this show for you. One thing some listeners will note is that I've had a grand total of 2 different sponsors during the life of this podcast. Unbeknownst to anyone else, only one of those deals actually involved any money. I'm not going to lie, money does help. Some pocket change to cover recording and production expenses would go a long way to ensure I can continue doing this for as long as possible. With that said, please do check out the podcast's new Patreon account. If you like this show, you can choose to donate $1 a month to the podcast and also earn some really cool rewards like an invitation to join the show's supporter-only private Slack group that I'll be creating, where we'll speak about the drone topics that you want to hear about and get more one-on-one interaction. So go ahead and check out what you can do to help at patreon.com/dronespodcast. That's patreon.com/dronespodcast. Thanks a bunch. Back to the show. Welcome to CommercialDrones.fm, the podcast that explores the commercial drone industry, the people who power it, and the concepts that drive it. I'm your host, Ian Smith. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Commercial Drones FM. I'm here in San Francisco with April Glaser, who covers robots, drones, artificial intelligence, and other smart machines for Recode. And prior to joining Recode, she held a journalism fellowship at Wired Magazine, where she produced podcasts and reported on the cultural, legal, and business aspects of autonomous technologies. Her writing has also appeared in Slate, Gizmodo, and Back Channel. She's got a degree in philosophy from Temple University as well. So welcome to the show, April. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Ian. Great to be here.
Yeah. So can you tell us, first of all, like, what is Recode? I mean, some people might not know what Recode even is.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe it's a bit smaller of a publication, but amongst folks here in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, it's definitely an influential publication because we report on the business of technology, but really the nitty gritty stuff and media as well. So when people are leaving, when money is changing hands, when there's an epic failure, we're usually the first to break those stories. Our executive editor is Kara Swisher, who is one of the most, if not the most, celebrated technology journalists in the history of technology journalism.
Nice.
She started Recode a few years ago, and it was recently acquired by Vox.com.
Okay.
And so we're kind of the tech business publication with Vox Media.
So Vox also owns, I think, The Verge and maybe some other things. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So how did you get into? So you're a journalist at Recode. You report on drones, robots, autonomous vehicles, all this technology. But how did you get into that? I mean, was this something that was kind of suggested to you, or you were like, "Oh, hey, I really like these drones. I like these this technology, these robots." Like, what's the story behind that?
Well, I've always spent my life focusing on technology policy and kind of the legal implications of technology. But as a kind of a geek, I was always kind of a hardware geek, did hardware hacking and different things, and had been following the robotics industry for a while. A member of a hacker space, people were always building cool stuff. When I saw that this opening was coming up, I had been going to academic conferences on robotics and meeting people who are in the drone industry and for the past couple years, and had just developed a very sincere fascination with how quickly it was moving, with the idea of flying robots, this kind of uncapitalized airspace and what it could mean. And the fact that it was in the making now, I thought that this was a time that I could jump in and really report on an industry as it's forming. And I've been at Recode now for about 4 months, and it's moving quickly already since I've been there, and it's just a very exciting time to be following robotics and drones.
I was just looking through in preparation of the show. In 4 months, you've written quite a few articles. Actually, it was like over 140 or something like that. So nicely done.
Thank you.
Putting in the work.
I think, and to the people who are listening, you guys are doing a lot of work, and I feel like there's just an interminable amount to write on, and I'm sincerely interested in all of it. So have
Perfect.
Definitely been typing away.
Well, we're very glad to read your story. So you were recently at CES 2017 in Las Vegas, Nevada. Consumer electronics show. Historically, obviously, most people know about it, but it's, a lot of technology is announced there, most of it usually being consumer. And there is a drone area at the show. Like, what's the deal? I mean, I want to talk about your experience at CES. Like, maybe you can give us like a brief synopsis. Like, what did you see there and what was interesting?
A lot of dudes. I'll say that first and foremost, is that there are definitely a lot of men at CES and not as many women, but hopefully every year that'll get better. But no, there is a huge drone section. I wasn't there the year before, but what I heard is that last year the drone area was actually quite bigger, and this year it was more consolidated, and perhaps that's a reflection on the industry. But there were all kinds of amazing demonstrations, and it was really fun to just see everybody show off their best technology, the stuff that's not out yet, that's going to be out soon. People who are actually geeks in this space get to quiz engineers, and it's a really kind of exciting environment with so many things happening there. And it's not just drones at CES. Of course, there's also a lot of cars and robotics and sound systems. So it's really just a place where 200,000 geeks descend on Las Vegas, which is already kind of an intense place to be. But the drone area was really exciting because they set up all these cages where drones are flying around in these sets and doing all these demos. Of course, DJI had an amazing booth. Right now, it's not necessarily that legal to fly drones over people and populated areas, particularly inside of a building. But they had found a way to do it. They set up this amazing kind of clear ceiling area where you could look up in this kind of glass cage and see drones flying overhead.
Oh, yeah. I think did you post a picture of that on Twitter? Maybe?
Yeah, I tweeted that. I think one of my favorite things, though, at CES was actually Qualcomm's demonstration. And they're not a drone maker, but they make processors, right?
Yeah.
And they're a chip maker. And they've been working on their Snapdragon drone platform, which is this kind of combined machine learning and autonomous flight platform. So as the drone flies, it can actually name what it's looking at in the room. And so it's not using GPS to navigate. And I thought that was really cool. So they had this kind of setup that mocked up the inside of a warehouse.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to me because GPS doesn't work inside, but there are a lot of applications where you're going to want to fly drones indoors,
Totally.
And so that's where machine learning really makes sense with autonomous flight, because it was learning what needed to avoid. As it saw something, it said, oh, that's a ladder, that's a barrel, and avoided those things, and then actually was able to map out the room and fly faster as it learned the room around it. And I thought that technology was really impressive and really indicative of the type of artificial intelligence that we're going to be seeing on board drones in the future.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting. I remember that Qualcomm announcement. That was pretty, I think everyone kind of took that as like, okay, this is where this technology is headed, because these processors, which they're flying computers. Mm-hmm. I think I took that from one of your stories, actually. But they're just flying computers, and it all depends on the processing power on board. So it was indicative of what's to come for the drone industry once everyone gets their hands on those chips. So the DJI thing actually. So that was their booth, what you're saying. So they were flying drones above people, but in like some type of transparent, like there was like a transparent barrier between the drone and the people. And so if it failed, it wouldn't knock someone on the head.
Yeah, I just thought it was really cool. And that's what they had. I mean, DJI obviously just makes some of the best drones on the market, just in terms of their engineering. And it's just really neat to see a bunch of drones flying over your head in a glass box. You know, it's just a really, as someone who's enthusiastic about this technology, I totally geeked out at that booth. There was also a Polaroid actually had a number of drones. I think they had like 8, which I wasn't aware of until now. But they had about 8. I think a couple of them are already to market, but they had 8 drones set up, and I guess many more are going to come to market in the next year, kind of taking their photography expertise on board, but also they have this amazing consumer-facing brand, and so I think we should expect to see drones come out of companies we didn't necessarily think were going to. It was great to see GoPro's Karma, which I hadn't seen yet. I had only heard reports of because it was recalled so quickly after it hit market.
They were there?
GoPro was there. And at CES, Nick Woodman made an announcement that the Karma is going to launch again in February. So apparently they figured out whatever the battery malfunction was that was causing the aircraft to fall from the sky, which is not what we want. They fixed that apparently, and they're going to try to come back to market. I was surprised to see that it was a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be.
The actual drone.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Whereas the Mavic, I don't know if you've seen like the comparable one. It's quite small. And the Karma is small too. It just requires its own carrying case. You can't like throw it in your backpack type of thing. And so it was interesting to finally see that because I had reported on it. There was a lot of hype around it. And of course, then there was the huge snafu with the battery malfunction where they had to recall all of them. You know, hardware is hard, but making hardware that flies is even harder, you know? So
absolutely. Yeah. About the size difference on the Mavic and the, you know, I thought on the announcement or the launch events for DJI and GoPro for both of their drones, Nick Woodman, you know, theirs was a week earlier, the CEO or the GoPro announcement. And he pulled out a backpack with a drone in it. And then whenever DJI did theirs, I thought it was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek jab is how I took it when Michael Perry was on stage and he pulled the Mavic from his back pocket and not even a backpack. So yeah, that was funny. Well, we all know, you know, now that you mentioned GoPro, I'm not that surprised they were there. Of course, they have an entire other line of products besides the Karma. And, you know, we all know that GoPro makes some good cameras that can actually make some pretty good launch videos for certain products.
GoPro makes amazing cameras. I mean, I think what you're alluding to is the recent case that has come to fore with the Lily drone that never came to fruition. And we learned that in their video, which had really created a lot of hype a couple years ago and in fact generated $34 million in pre-sale orders. Some 60,000 pre-sale drones were sold. Of course, the drones weren't sold because the drones didn't exist yet. But in that video that they shot that got all that excitement going and was responsible for getting all those sales and as well as something like 15 million in Series A venture capital funding, a good video can go a long way. That was shot with a GoPro as well as a DJI Inspire.
And that was kind of a dirty little secret, would we say as such? I mean, you just wrote an article, so we're going to talk about some of the articles that you've written in the past month, which are all super interesting. There's so much going on right now in the industry. Just in January, it is ridiculous. But the whole Lily thing, like, okay, I have strong opinions on this. I never fell into the hype. I can honestly say that. I didn't think the platform was that good. I was actually shocked at the reception that it received because I just knew from experience, or I thought I knew, and I guess I was somewhat correct, but that's really hard to do. Like it just seemed like something that the technology wasn't even capable of doing that yet. And so anyways, yeah, you wrote this article and now they're getting sued.
They're getting sued by the district attorney's office for the city of San Francisco, and they're getting sued for corrupt and fraudulent and misleading behavior. It's a consumer protection lawsuit because the DA is alleging that they had led customers on to think that this drone existed and that it was going to exist and that it was very manufacturable. And the DA had amassed evidence over the past few months in their investigation, which they launched or which they went public with their lawsuit went public the same day that Lily announced it was closing, which was just a very dramatic day for the drone world. But yeah, and they basically said that Lily, put a video out that misled customers to think that they were going to get a product that never existed and that Lily wasn't making and that wasn't going to come to market. As well, they allege that Lily had broken an FTC, a Federal Trade Commission law that says, and this is kind of a pre-order law, If somebody prepays for a product and they don't get it within 30 days of the promised delivery date, then the quote unquote manufacturer is supposed to give them the option to get a full refund back, or they have to consent to a further delay. And Lilly never gave any of their pre-orders an option to consent to further delay. They just said, oh, it's going to be another 6 months, bear with us, or it's going to be another 3 months. They just kept announcing further product delays and never gave the option for people to get their money back. That said, if people had requested it, perhaps they would have fulfilled that. I'm not sure of the details of specific cases, but they were supposed to give that option explicitly and people had to consent or else they had to issue that refund. So that was part of the lawsuit as well. A lot came out in that lawsuit, actually.
One of my favorite things is a quote from Antoine Balleresque, the co-founder of Lilly. And it says, I'm worried that a lens geek, it's an email. It's I guess it's case files or something.
Some discovery from the lawsuit. Exactly.
It says, I'm worried that a lens geek could study our images up close and detect the unique GoPro lens footprint. But I'm just speculating here. I don't know much about lenses, but I think we should be extremely careful if we decide to lie publicly. I don't know how careful they were in the end, but they got caught and doing some really, really shady stuff. I
mean, it's interesting to think about what this will do, for the industry and for trust in drones. I mean, this comes at a time, the same month we've seen Parrot drop a substantial amount of its workforce that was dedicated to drones. Last fall, 3DR announced it was no longer going to be making consumer drones and kind of moving away from drone manufacturing. Lilly was something people were really excited about, another drone manufacturer that wasn't able to bring their product to fruition. This really comes at a time when the drone industry should be developing a lot of hype and people should be getting really excited about these products. And also, not to mention GoPro again, their drone failed within weeks of it coming to market. They had to do a complete recall. I mean, it's just one after the other. And everyone seems to want a drone. I mean, I think the FAA said over 600,000 drones were registered last year. This is just happening so quickly in terms of the demand, but we're not seeing the companies really deliver. So it's a very interesting market right now, for sure.
And in the meantime, DJI is kind of sitting pretty in the corner, just hands folded on the lap, kind of watching this unfold, which I'm sure is great from a business standpoint. But I'm sure that they deep down you have to have competition, and it's great to have all this competition. So it's not Lilly doing all this stuff. Yes, bad business practices. It would have been really cool to see that kind of platform exist, and I think the closest it's ever existed is the Mavic Pro from DJI, which is really interesting.
I mean, well, that's the thing, is that so Lilly announced this product in 2015. By the time they announced it, and by the time that they failed to bring it to market, they announced it wasn't going to happen. The Mavic came out, which has just a lot of the features that were advertised in the Lilly, right? One thing that you mentioned, you saw the video, and I'd actually be curious to hear what to you didn't seem like was going to actually work, or why you were a skeptic about the video, because I've been speaking to engineers for the past week or so as I've been writing my report, just trying to dissect where they were lying or where they were over-promising. One of the points that people made is that Lilly's drone had a kind of a cylindrical shape, which is the most drag-inducing shape, and you wouldn't see that on another one was that their drone could pop out of water, go in and pop out of water. That takes a lot of propulsion power, and the size of their drone just wouldn't be able to carry a battery load. That could, not that drones can't go in and out of water, that's certainly possible, but that takes a lot of power to break that surface, Did
you ever actually hold one? Did you get to feel because I remember no, I didn't, but okay. I know that there was one prototype that I know about, that I heard about, and I saw a picture on Facebook in some shop in some gadget store somewhere here in California. And to me, my first thing when I first saw it was that there's no way that thing is going to fly, because the materials itself look like it was just so darn heavy, and it didn't look practical at all for a flying machine. And I don't know. I just had this feeling, I guess. I mean, I definitely wasn't looking at the aerodynamic shape of it and everything, because, worse shaped things have flown. I've seen them.
That's true.
But this is just an insane story. I mean, you got Lilia off the heels of 3DR, and then, Parrot. So we were kind of talking about Parrot. So they laid off a third of their drone division, which is about 290 employees. Is this, do you think, because of DJI?
I do think that companies just can't compete with DJI. And it's because DJI, well, first of all, it's because drones are very hard to make well. Parrot obviously was making good drones. But 3DR also had problems with their manufacturing. Their drone wasn't delivered with the gimbal that it was supposed to have, and other things that are incredibly essential for, a drone that's supposed to be for aerial imaging. Lily didn't come to market. DJI is just, their engineering is so good. They've been in the kind of drone and recreational aviation kind of hobby RC space for something like over 10 years. And so, just now drones are starting to become popular, but they had all of this time to fail and experiment and really perfect their engineering, and it's just incredibly hard to keep up with them. They also manufacture in the same place where they design, in Shenzhen. And that type of kind of vertical style of integration where they get to iterate right there on the spot, I think also makes them quite hard to compete with. They also don't necessarily have the arrogance that we see a lot of these venture capital funded companies have, I would say, just because, they don't launch their new drones, and maybe it's because they don't have to, because they're already so successful, but with these just incredibly shiny videos and make all these big promises, they actually just have the drone is there and ready. So they're incredibly hard to compete with. That there's, I think, a constellation of reasons why. But yeah, Parrot also, which was, probably the second most formidable kind of competitor to DJI, is starting to inch out of the consumer drone space, and they're going to focus on commercial operations, which makes sense because commercial drones are a huge market, and it's growing as people discover more applications. And consumer drones are also a huge market, but there's a lot that can go wrong there. Again, DJI was the big competitor with Mavic. The GoPro Karma couldn't stay in the sky. It's just, there's a lot of different reasons why they keep emerging. A lot of it's the follies of their competitors. Yeah, for sure.
So I'm taking this from your article, by the way, but they missed their quarterly sales estimates by 15%. So like you said, they're going to switch their focus to commercial, but consumer drones for Parrot generated more than 80% of its $60 million revenue in Q4 of 2016, which is just insane. Drones are big business. This is a commercial drones FM podcast. Like, we need the figures to back all this up and justify. We need proof, and that's some proof in pudding. But even despite that, Parrot looking to, I guess, leverage more of their company SenseFly, which specializes in commercial, more industrial grade drones, which is a space that has big margins. I know for a fact some massive margins, especially on fixed wing aircraft. If you look at fixed wing aircraft, they are expensive as hell. They're hard to do, but if Parrot doubles down on that, I think they can really make a nice run at DJI, because DJI just doesn't have anything fixed wing.
And that's the thing, is in the commercial kind of industrial drone space, there's not a clear dominant player right now. This is definitely a place where someone or a company can emerge as a dominant player, not only because there's not a DJI to compete with, but also because there aren't the regulations that the consumer industry has to grapple with. We have Part 107 now. We know the rules. An industrial operation isn't trying to, delivery is like the smallest subset of these applications. They're not trying to buzz through busy city streets necessarily, or trying to fly over people at night. They want to work during the day when other people are working. They just don't have the same regulatory hurdles that delivery drones will have, and especially that consumer drones will have. Also, they're going to be operated by professionals. So there are a lot less snafus, a lot less potential for bad press.
Yes.
DJI has been experiencing this over the past year. People buy their drones and can put anything on them and fly them over anywhere. And DJI doesn't have control over what people do with them. With commercial operations, that your PR is a lot safer, like kind of what you're going into in terms of potential bad headlines that can emerge out of your drone. Another thing with DJI to think about is, I think, at least this is what Chris Anderson told me, and I put this in my story. I had a chance to speak with him. He's the founder of 3D Robotics, which was also a competitor to DJI in the consumer space, but is now focusing, like Parrot, focusing on its commercial applications and kind of industrial software. But he said that DJI in 2015 dropped prices of their consumer drones by 70%. In about 9 months. And he said he had never seen anything like that before, and that was very difficult to compete with. And whether it was DJI that dropped the price or people that were selling them, however that worked out, the prices dropped to a point where competitors just couldn't compete. Parrot has a really good chance to, I think, do well in the commercial space because, like DJI, they've been doing drones for a lot longer than most other folks. And that experience goes a long way because, like I said, hardware is hard. Making hardware fly is even harder. And Parrot actually, they make good aircraft.
They do.
And they have a very large fleet of commercial drones. I think over 10. SenseFly, which is their commercial subsidiary, has a lot of different products available for many applications. But they don't have the software. And as you know, there's a huge ecosystem happening right now where people are building all kinds of software applications.
Yeah, so DJI is definitely playing to win. I mean, you can see that. But also, one thing that Parrot will inevitably run into is, DJI just launched an enterprise division, DJI Enterprise.
They did.
And so they are not going to sit on their laurels, of course. And as soon as they see some more traction, I mean, it was just like so obvious that it seemed like right after the Karma launch that, our Mavic Pro launch is actually going to be a week later, because if you look at the timeline when GoPro announced the launch announcement date, then DJI had time to, after the leaks of the Mavic on social media and stuff and the pictures, to adjust their launch announcement date to be after GoPro's. And I'm sure that they took all the strategic information from that to, doctor up their announcement really quick and make any last second changes if they needed to. But in the end, it looks like the hardware failure of the Karma kind of helped them too. But
to DJI's credit, I did hear that the timing of the Karma announcement and the Mavic announcement was incidental. But
really?
hard to know. I will say that a lot of products try to come out in time for the holidays, which
That's
actually
true.
DJI was unable to do. They were unable to get the Mavic. They ran into a snafu with their production as well, but I think handled it very responsibly. But definitely there were some back orders and people didn't get their Mavic under the tree in time for Christmas.
We can't forget that. That's right.
So I think that's important. Like even they also, had a little issue that they had to suss out, and people are now starting to get them. And I'm hearing all kinds of reports of people flying them and seeing them.
We can't forget that. And also we can't forget, it wasn't always so easy for DJI. It still isn't easy. They went through so many. I mean, if anyone remembers what a flyaway is, nobody really talks about that anymore. The kind of thought is that if you have a flyaway these days, something really, really rare happened inside the aircraft with either, some weird software or hardware bug. But they used to be just known as the company, don't buy a Phantom, it's just going to fly away. And now it's literally the best drone that you can buy for so many applications. So earlier you had mentioned delivery. So one really cool story that you just wrote recently, very recently, it might have been the latest one that you did, was robots delivering food to doorstep. So we're going to switch from the sky, we're going to come back down to Mother Earth, down to the ground. So what's the deal with this? Little robots delivering food to people? What's going on?
I like going from sky to ground because I do imagine a type of ecosystem where drones might drop a package down and then in a central location, because drones can't really drop anywhere, and then a robot will pick it up and take it to like an outdoor ground robot, which I'm about to talk about. And then they also have indoor robots that take things to, say, like in a hotel room or in an office, and there could be just a complete automated delivery pathway.
Depressing.
I know, that's the thing.
When you say it like that, it's like, I sounds so smart, but
that, I don't know. Yeah, I still use a French press and basically only own a phone charger. So I get that it's depressing, but it is something that makes sense, particularly because on-demand startups have also been dropping like flies. It's an incredibly difficult business model to make work because of worker turnover, because of just having to stockpile things.
When you say on demand,
have it ready, like meal start. So there was Sidecar, which was a competitor to Uber that's no longer there. Spoon Rocket was a meal delivery startup that's no longer around. There was I think it was called Homejoy, which was a house cleaning startup that was on demand, no longer around.
Oh, wow.
There's just a lot of reasons why this business model doesn't work. When it comes to on-demand delivery, though, Caviar is one. Postmates isn't profitable, actually, even though they have a ton of funding. It's very hard to make these things profitable. Robots, and I say this with a bit of a cringe, actually make sense, right? To not to take the place of people, but it's actually like people just aren't doing these jobs. They don't want to do them. They don't do them. They do them slowly. It's very hard to get that 1 hour delivery turnover that Amazon is trying to do, or even 2 days that they've really got to set up to want things so quickly. So what I wrote about, though, is a technology called, or not a technology rather, but a company called Starship Technologies. And they were started by a couple of founders from Skype. And, who knows if this will really take off? These things come and go all the time. But they did just get $17 million in seed funding, and that matters. But what they've developed is a little ground delivery 6-wheeled robot to go from, say, a restaurant to your house. And it's autonomous. It's supposed to go without people. And I guess, you put the takeout in the robot if you're at the restaurant, and you put in your phone app the place where it's going to go, the house. And of course, it wouldn't really work at an apartment, or if it would, you'd have to come downstairs. It can't go upstairs. And then you come down and you pick it up out of this kind of glorified cooler on wheels that's driving by itself, and it's there, and you're already paid, through your phone. There's a lot of assumptions that will need to actually play out for this to work. Where I'm from Nashville, but I lived in Philly for 8 years, which is a place where I could just imagine these robots getting spray painted and kicked over and stolen. Or
delivering delicious cheesesteaks.
Right. They're not big enough to hold a pizza. I think that's important to remember. That's a big delivery market. But there's definitely... I think they'll work in some places and not in others, and maybe they'll work in others eventually, but it'll definitely take some kind of cultural acclimation for people to really be like, okay, I'm not going to steal this. Or, okay,
this is my friend.
I'm not going to kick this over because it's a stupid thing on the street, like I kick everything. But no, they are now delivering in Redwood City, which is a city in Silicon Valley, just south of here, as well as in Washington, D.C. The catch is that they will be autonomous eventually. Apparently, all the tech is there; they're ready to go. I've seen them before. You said you've seen one, but right now they need a handler.
Handler.
So basically, and I wouldn't want this
when you
job.
say that, all I'm thinking about is the Thanksgiving Day dog show where like the handler's like coaxing the dog to like prance very like.
But you're thinking
daintily.
Correctly, yeah, actually. So there's actually somebody walking alongside the robot as it makes its delivery. At least for now. The idea is eventually they won't have to. They're not required to have a handler by law. I asked them. I asked if this is part of the regulation. They said no. They can go off on their own.
Oh, that's interesting.
But right now they want to collect data. They want to, in case something terrible happens, they want to make sure you still get your takeout. They've been delivering in London for a few months now, since last year. So right now they have a deal with DoorDash, which is a delivery on-demand service here in California, and they have a deal with Postmates, which is a very popular service, and they're piloting these in DC and in Redwood City. We'll see how they go. I mean, I'm going to be tracking this. It's really interesting to me just to think and kind of to put my like sci-fi hat on and get kind of excited about weird futures, having robots sharing the sidewalk with me, you know, delivering things around. It also kind of bums me out just because I like people. But like I said, we do see this kind of on-demand startup space just be an incredibly difficult thing that people actually want. So it's a business model that makes sense in theory. Like, you know, I want stuff to be brought to me right now. You know, yesterday I'm hungry. I'm a you know, a 30-year-old impatient millennial. But when it comes to the economics of it, it's just really hard to make work. So maybe bringing in, you know, a little, you know, robotics thinking actually makes sense in this space. And, you know, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. But this just started at the beginning of this week. I know it started Wednesday was when this news launched.
Yeah, the whole societal kind of acceptance of this reminds me of like the Google Glass thing. I guess we'll see. It's a little bit different because some people probably got hit in the face because of it. Poor robot, I hope it doesn't get hit. But I saw one of these in person. It's actually a lot bigger. I think what the dimensions is about 2 feet tall, and it weighs about 40 pounds empty, and it kind of like kind of strolls along the sidewalk at a 4 mile per hour pace. So cool. I'll take a robot delivery any day. I think that's really cool, and it'll be fun to see who's going to do the first aerial, like you mentioned, aerial drone to, you know, ground-based terrestrial drone handoff delivery over to the house. And I'm sure there's going to be some companies really trying to work with Starship Technologies on that. Awesome. Well, shifting focus a little bit. This has been in the news like mega lately. The FAA has issued the largest fine ever. $1.9 million fine, down to $200,000. So it was going to be $1.9 million, down to $200,000. What's the deal behind this fine? You wrote a story on this.
Yeah, so I have a question standing with the FAA. Hopefully they'll answer my information request soon, but I want to know why the fine dropped by 90%. That's a crazy drop. In October, they issued a fine to a company called Skypan International based out of Chicago for conducting what they said were 65 illegal, unauthorized, reckless, actually was the word that they used, flights over Chicago and New York City over the course of, I think, between 2012 and 2014. But
2 years of
2 years of reckless flying. And they were, you know, this is the most congested airspace in the country. It's very important that, especially as we're figuring these technologies out and the regulations out, that pilots and operators kind of get to know each other. And when I talk about pilot, I mean like people who are flying airplanes and actually manned aircraft, you know, don't become afraid of drones. It's just a very sensitive time, I think, for the industry. So it's definitely, we don't want to see this kind of behavior now. If this is an industry that's going to actually get as big as people are projecting it will. But Skypan was threatened in October with a $1.9 million fine. Earlier this week, the FAA announced that the fine has been dropped to $200,000 substantially. I will let you know when I find out why. But they are now required to pay that fine as well. They have been threatened with a $150,000 fine if they violate another FAA rule this year. And they're also required to make 3 PSAs with the public service announcements about drone safety with the FAA. I don't know if they're going to be like, hey, don't do what we did. But essentially, that's their slap on the wrist. And like I said, it's such a dramatic number change, a 90% drop. $1.9 million would be a huge fine and really send a message to the industry that the FAA is very serious about making sure drones are safe and that they're following the rules as they come out. And of course, the rules are still being written. So it's very confusing and understandable. One thing to remember is that Skypan actually violated the FAA rules before the Part 107 rule came out in August. So this was at a time when they had to get a special waiver to conduct these flights, right? So they couldn't, I mean, of course, now they couldn't fly them over these congested cities right now anyway.
Yeah.
But this was before there was as much clarity as there is now. Even so, they were violating the rules. They were breaking the law. 200,000 is still a lot of money.
Yeah.
For sure.
1.9
million.
1.9 for sure. But I mean, the FAA, it's all about safety. Like it's all about safety. So, so there's been questions like how will the FAA reinforce these rules, like, or enforce the rules rather, and it looks like they're kind of sending a message here. Like 1.9 million would have been a message, but 200K is still a message.
It would cripple a lot of new companies for sure.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't be doing business. And actually that's interesting that they did not revoke their operator certificates, like allowing them to continue to operate their aircraft. So that's interesting. Please keep us in the loop on that and update us. The next kind of story that we'll talk about, we've got just two more that we're going to touch on. These paper airplane. This is really cool. So I saw this story coming across social media. I didn't really read it too much. I thought paper airplane drones. Okay, that's kind of cool. Whatever. Like paper. It's paper, and you stick a motor in it, and then it's a drone. But I was just reading your story on it, and it's actually fascinating. Tell us about these paper airplane drones that could one day save our lives.
Sure. So this is thanks to a grant from Darpa, who the kind of experimental arm of the military that also helped to develop autonomous driving technology, which has led to a whole new industry that's now burgeoning. They gave a grant to a startup, or not a startup, but rather a research space here in San Francisco called Other Lab. And to develop this disposable drone technology. And these drones are really neat. They're made out of cardboard. And the idea is that they can carry medical supplies to places that have poor road conditions or that people really shouldn't go. And the inspiration for this, I was speaking to one of the engineers. Her name is Star Simpson, and she was saying that the idea is that, like, imagine during the Ebola outbreak, there were so many places where they couldn't get vaccines fast enough. And also people couldn't go there. And so a drone just made a perfect sense. But also they didn't want to, it makes sense to have one that just goes one way and that's disposable, and one that anybody can create and fold up. So these, so what they've developed is these kind of cardboard drones that come in this flat packaging that anyone can fold together and assemble. And then package with a vaccine or medical supplies, and then whoever they have a small computer inside, so they could be programmed then to fly to a certain location, and they don't need to be sent back because they're so cheap to make, and they are disposable. So it's a one-way drone. They're not drone is maybe not the right word. They certainly are autonomous aircraft. So I would put them under that category, but they're gliders, and so.
They don't have a motor.
They don't have a motor.
That's
they glide.
The kicker. That's why this is so crazy.
Yeah, they
it's
have
way.
sensors that actually change the surface controls of the aircraft, so they can, change their wings or their rudders to go so that way they actually land in the exact correct place. But they're super light. They don't have a motor. They're deployed from another aircraft, like a helicopter or another like airplane or something like that, and then they just go to their destination. And they're one way. Because they're one way, they can go twice as far as another drone.
Yeah, they don't need to come back.
They don't need to come back. It's a pretty fascinating technology, and and it's again thinking about autonomous aircraft in places where they can really solve a real need, and really help people, and thinking about all of the technical possibilities of small aircraft and what they can carry without, unpiloted aircraft. It's pretty exciting that they're thinking in these terms, and that they're really thinking of emergency response, as well as just incredibly cheap materials. I mean, it doesn't have to be super fancy. It doesn't have to be produced in a factory and sourced with all these crazy parts. This is a cardboard kit that you just fold together, tape up, put the medicines on, and then whoever you're working with will program it to fly to the right place. And right, it's a research project right now. They're actually working with a I guess like a biotech startup about making the cardboard material, actually making it out of mushroom, like mycelium type filament or something like that.
Like edible?
No.
Oh,
so
okay.
that way
Biodegradable.
it can biodegrade, but it would be made out of a mushroom based material or like a mycelia based material. So that's pretty cool. In all the different spaces that they're collaborating with to make these disposable aircraft. One thing that's pretty neat about this is that it actually comes from a Darpa program that is all about kind of disappearing technology. It's Darpa's Vanishing Programmable initiative. And so they're also working on like a type of glass that like shatters and dissipates. Xerox is working on that. So it's neat that Darpa's working on all this technology that disappears. It's like disappearing, evaporating, disposable tech. I don't know if it's like from a science perspective, it's fascinating. I mean, talk about planned obsolescence.
Bullets.
Yeah, it's also a little terrifying, but this we see a health application. So that's pretty neat.
I'm fascinated. I'm gonna be following that very closely. The last headline, here it is. The US government showed just how easy it is to hack drones made by Parrot, DB Power, and Cheerson. That's kind of alarming.
Yeah, so drones are computers and they're often connected to the internet, and anything that's connected to the internet can be hacked. It's vulnerable, and drones are no exception. The difference with drones is that they're flying and have propellers and can fall out of the sky when they're hacked, right? And so security, when it comes to drones and actually like having information security and encryption in terms of, between the operator and the aircraft, as well as the open Wi-Fi network that a lot of these drones operate on, is incredibly important. So the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, had been researching this all last year. They kind of spent many months looking into the security of drones, and they presented their research in October. I submitted a FOIA request to find out exactly which drones they were referring to, because when they presented their research, they said, oh, well, we have these 3 drones that we were able to hack into, and on 2 of them, we could take complete control of the flight path. We could turn off the aircraft and cause them both to fly from the sky. On all of them, they were able to take the video feed over and see what the drone was seeing, and not let the operator know that this was happening. And I was like, well, I want to know which companies did this. And so, like a journalist, like I do all the time, I submitted a FOIA request and found out that the 3 drones, one was from Parrot, which is, we were just talking about before, a very popular drone company. It was their AR drone elite quadcopter. Another one was from DB Power, less popular, but certainly they make a lot of consumer drones. These are all kind of under $200, all of these drones I'm talking about. So these are the kind you'd get off the shelf and give as a gift to your nephew or niece or whatever. That was the Hawkeye 2 from DB Power. And then Cheerson, another drone company, their one case, CX-10W, was hacked as well. And yeah, they were just able to show that also another thing they were able to show was that all the smartphone apps that came with the drones gave absolutely gave no notification when somebody was hacking into the video feed. So you have no idea this is happening. And it really just, I think, illustrated, particularly the fact that they could commandeer 2 of them and take over the flight path and make them fall to the ground, how important security and encryption is to think about when it comes to these drones. Because they were able to do this by just sitting at a computer and hacking into the drone's computer system. And they were, not near they don't have to be right next to it. They were just hacking. These
are going to be big issues coming up. I was listening to something on NPR that was a guy. It was basically kind of like a TED talk, and this guy was talking. He's a researcher, and he specializes in cybersecurity and the Internet of Things. And people could, and it's not just drones that this is going to be happening to, it's autonomous cars. There were cases where autonomous driving vehicles could be taken over, or not even like fully autonomous ones, like optionally piloted vehicles, if you can say that. And the brakes could be activated, and you could presumably just drive the car right off the road or into another car by hacking into it. And so there are a lot of unsecure technologies that we're bringing into our homes and in our lives and that are going to be flying above us that are not very secure. And so this is going to be a big issue coming up. And this is something you mentioned before we started recording, that you're going to be starting to pay really, really close attention to yourself too.
Yeah, I think particularly with drones, it's going to matter a lot because, unlike other smart home devices like my toaster or my refrigerator, which certainly I don't want hacked, a drone can fall from the sky and really hurt somebody. And also because this is an industry that has a lot, like I said, I'm fascinated by this industry. It has a lot of potential to grow. These snafus at this point, it's in the industry, it's such a nascent space, really matter and can really affect things. Also, people are afraid of drones in many ways, right? And I think privacy is probably the biggest thing people are afraid of. We did a Twitter poll where something like a little over 1,000, maybe 1,100 people participated, asking what's their biggest fear with drones. And privacy was the biggest one that they were concerned about. Falling from the sky wasn't. But certainly if more drones fall from the sky, that's going to be an issue.
True.
So definitely keeping an eye on this. That said, the things that drone makers can do to ensure the security of these devices isn't that complicated. They could simply encrypt the links, between the operator and the aircraft, and lock the Wi-Fi down on the drone, and do these kind of basic things. Just one example I'll give. If I don't know if you remember this, I think it was in November of last year. The New York Times website went down, Recode's website went down, Twitter went down, and it was because of a huge botnet that was created from hundreds of thousands of IoT devices in people's houses. One hacker was able to, because they're all connected to the internet, kind of weaponize the hundreds of thousands of mostly security cameras from this one company that uses this chip maker, or this particular chip from China, and the kind of the ubiquity of this particular chipset or this component set allowed for the hacker to create a huge botnet from all of these devices in people's homes around the world, and actually send a DDoS attack, which is when they just send so many requests to overload the servers of this particular hosting company that serves the websites for these really large companies like Twitter, like I think Spotify went down, New York Times went down. So, when it comes to security of internet connected devices, whether they're flying or whether we just have them plugged into the wall, that's going to be an increasingly important thing to look at.
Wow. We're in for some potential dark times if they get a hold of our smart light bulbs.
That's
well.
True, yeah. And I also don't want to scare anyone. I mean, really, like I said, these fixes, particularly with drones, are relatively easy to do. And it's just something that drone makers need to be aware of, is safety and security. So I encourage, and DJI has taken this very seriously. I'm sure, other drone makers have. I want to say Parrot has, but then obviously they're one of the drones that the FTC was able to hack and make fall from the sky. So it's just something that as more people come into the market and more drone makers emerge, that I hope that they're thinking about.
Cool. Well, April Glaser, thank you so much for joining us. That was a marathon session. We covered so much in such a short amount of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, April Glaser covers robots, drones, artificial intelligence, and other smart machines for Recode. And you can go ahead and check out some of April's stories at recode.net and follow her on Twitter at April Laser. That's APRILASER. This is her beat, ladies and gentlemen. She covers drones. So send her some tips as well if you got them. She's going to be continually reporting behind the scenes and figuring out really interesting things for us. So, April, we really appreciate it. Hope we can have you back soon, talk more about this drone hacking stuff that we're going to be seeing inevitably. Pleasure to have you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I look forward to hearing more of these podcasts. I've been enjoying them so far.
Thank you for listening. So if you want to, you can follow the podcast at Drones Podcast on Twitter, on Facebook.com/Drones Podcast. And if you like what you heard, subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, whatever you listen to podcasts on, and check out the website, commercialdrones.fm. We've got a Patreon account if you're interested in supporting the podcast as well. So we are going to now cut off the mics. Everybody take care and watch out for your smart devices. Cheers. All right, so that's a wrap. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. One thing you can do to support the show is to visit our new Patreon page and consider donating some change at patreon.com/dronespodcast. So go ahead and donate $1 if you're feeling it. I will be forever grateful. Again, that's Patreon, patreon.com/dronespodcast. Over and out.